I'm Farhan Dalla, transformational trainer, and welcome to Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast, an invitation to take the journey towards your deepest self. It is my intention to inspire you to connect, move, and meditate. We'll tap in, tune in, and dive in, and together learn and reflect from authentic, real, and transformative conversations. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. I have two very incredible guests today. First, I'd like to introduce to you Vaibhav Jain. Vaibhav Jain is a global public health specialist who has worked for universities, think tanks, and the World Health Organization. He is currently consulting on a number of health and civic engagement projects and serves as National Outreach Director for the AAPI Victory Fund, a political action committee dedicated to increasing electoral power for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders across the United States. He is a former dental surgeon from New Delhi, India, who currently lives in Arlington, Virginia, with his husband, Parag Mehta. The two are plaintiffs in a landmark court case before the Delhi High Court, which seeks to legalize same-sex marriage for 1.4 billion people in the world's largest democracy. Sitting alongside him today is his husband, Parag Mehta. Parag is a managing director at JP Morgan Chase & Company. He serves as president of the firm's Policy Center, which was established in 2019 to leverage the assets and insights of the largest bank in the United States to design policy solutions that will create a more equitable and inclusive economy. Parag has spent the past 23 years working to advance justice, inclusion, and human rights through political activism, public service, and private sector action. He played several leadership roles in President Obama's administration, including as liaison to the AAPI and LGBTQ communities, and as chief of staff to the U.S. Surgeon General. He is the board chair of New American Leaders, a national nonprofit organization that works to strengthen American democracy by electing first and second generation immigrants and refugees to public office. Parag is an Indian American from Central Texas and a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin and the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. In addition to being global advocates for the LGBTQ plus rights, Vaibhav and Parag recently became fathers of two beautiful children born via surrogacy. In 2023, the couple welcomed a daughter, Pariniti, followed by a son, Vivan. Welcome, gents.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Farhan. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure, and happy Pride Month to you both.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
It's so nice to have you on here. I've been following your story for a few years now, and it all started with a video that I saw of your wedding day, where Parag, your dad, and Vaibhav, your now father-in-law, gave quite a speech that went viral. And I have so much that I want to talk to you about. And I know that you two are very busy people. I mean, just reading that bio, plus given the fact that you're you're two dads of two newborns, like you must have a really hectic schedule. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Sure, our pleasure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so where do I begin? Why don't we start, Parag, with you and give us a little bit of a breakdown of your coming out experience and what was that like? Let's start there.
Sure. So I came out my senior year of college at the University of Texas. I was living in Austin at the time, and it was 1998. I remember, having come to realize that I was gay probably when I was around 8 or 9 years old. And Vaibhav and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
Both of us grew up in families where no one explicitly told us that homosexuality was wrong or it was bad. We experienced bullying and taunting in school, but for some reason, we both knew immediately when we figured out we were gay that we weren't supposed to talk about it. So I kept it a secret for quite some time, probably 14 years. And then by the time I was in college, I had started dating somebody. I was starting to come out to myself at least, but I hadn't yet officially come out to any of my friends or my family. And I remember very clearly that day in October of 1998, I came home from school, from classes, and I turned on the news, and there was a story that had been going on for a week about a young man named Matthew Shepard. He was my age. He was actually just a couple months younger than me. He was a college student in Laramie, Wyoming, and he had been beaten almost to death by two people in a gay hate crime. And he had been lying in a coma for several days. And when I got home that night, the story on the news was that he had passed away. And I remember that night, I didn't feel scared. I felt angry. And anger, it turned out, was a healthy emotion, because I felt like it's not enough that we have to be in the closet. It's not enough that we have to hide who we are. Now we have to die for who we are. And that's simply not fair. So I got in my car, I drove back to campus. It was probably 7 o'clock at night. I went into the student union building where I did a lot of my extracurricular work. And I was a pretty active student leader on campus. So I went into the student union offices, and there was one advisor who was still in his office, still had the lights on. He was a new guy who had just started at the university a few weeks earlier. And I marched into his office and I said, I have to tell somebody this, and it's going to be you. I'm gay. And it was the first time I had ever said those two words on my own terms. And it was so liberating. And the guy I told it to, the advisor, he looked at me and he said, I'm gay too. And your life is about to get so much better. You are going to stand taller. You're going to breathe easier. You're going to sleep better at night. Life is about to get a lot better for you. And you're going to start this amazing process of coming out. And I did. And over the next several months, I started coming out first to close friends on campus, then eventually to my parents, which was hard, but actually really rewarding. And fast forward years later, 15 years later, when Vaibhav was taking the same journey with his own coming out, I was able to tell him what somebody once told me, that your life is about to get so much better. You're going to breathe easier and stand taller and sleep better. And we were both right.
Great. Thanks for sharing. And I remember when that Matthew Shepard story came out, it really hit all of us hard, whether you were part of the LGBTQ community or not. It was a very, very sad situation. And yeah, it certainly impacted me as well. Thank you for sharing that. Vaibhav, how about you? I understand from what Parag said, he was there to support and guide you, but what was your coming out experience like?
Yeah, so Farhan, obviously, I was deeply closeted. I didn't know this guy for, he's growing up here in the US, and I was back home in India. And, deeply closeted, grew up in a upper middle class family in Delhi. And, I think around the same age that Parag was, around 8 or 9 years of age, I knew that I was different. But I knew that it was the kind of different that I can talk about. And maybe it's not a great idea to talk about. So I absolutely had no frame of reference for the word gay. And I actually found out what the word gay meant. I think when I was in high school, a friend of mine was basically talking about, gay men. And I was like, what is gay men? And then he explained it to me. And so I had no idea. Went to the library, looked up the only, book that had the word gay in it. It was a very old Oxford dictionary. The first meaning of the word gay was happy. And then the second one was homosexual, or somebody, a man attracted to another man, or a woman attracted to another woman. And so what I understood at that point of time, early on in high school, was that it's something that I am, maybe, and no books talk about it. So obviously this is not something that's very common or that's natural. So maybe I should just not ever talk about it. So I just lived a, dual life, had, sort of underground gay friend circle, while, out in public, I would say, oh yeah, I'm straight. My girlfriend's back in this state and that state, like, making stuff up.
Yeah, in America, all of our girlfriends were in Canada.
Yeah.
Canada's home to a lot of easily different young women, apparently.
Ours were in South India. So I was in North India.
Oh, is that how you did it in South India?
It was just very convenient.
I should also just interrupt. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
At a moment when we're having this whole conversation in the United States about banning books and about don't say gay in schools, Vaibhav's story is so important. The fact that he had to go to his library, and the only resource in this Catholic school of yours was the Oxford Dictionary. That's the only place you could find it.
Very, very old book, yeah.
It's exactly the argument for why we need books and information and literature about LGBTQ identities. Because for the 8-year-old who's searching for some validation, that one line in an Oxford Dictionary was all you had.
Yeah, It was hard.
Yeah.
So, fast forward, I moved to the US, and, I promised myself, I'm like, I've lived this dual life and I think I'm sick and tired of this. When I move to the US, I will be honest to anybody who'd ask me, whether I'm dating, what my sexuality is. And I did that. So came here in August 2011 and then, had a really wonderful, community of friends who are now I call my chosen family and, slowly started to come out to them. And it was just wonderful. But, coming out to family was still, absolutely a no for me. I'm like, no. I'm here in the US. They're forcing me to get married. It's all gonna, this entire situation is gonna go away very soon. I wouldn't have to worry about it. Let's just keep it quiet. And then I met this one and I fell in love. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do now?
Right.
And I remember precisely the moment, Farhan, when things changed for me, is I think almost a year into us dating, we still hadn't met your parents. I believe. We did not met your parents. And we were driving and Parag was talking to his mom on speakerphone. And, he shared that, Mom, I don't know if you know this, but I'm dating this really great guy from Delhi. His name is Vaibhav and, so on and so forth. And I look forward to introducing you to him. And his mom, asked point blank, and is this guy out to his family? And he said, no, Mom, he's still, in the closet, but, he eventually wants to come out. And his mom's reaction was, so I don't think this is going to work for you. I think this is absolutely, I think you're wasting your time, Parag.
No, she said, she said then the relationship can't be serious.
Can be serious.
She said he can't be serious about you until he's first willing to deal with himself, which was, she was right.
And my heart sank. I was like, oh my God, I love this man. And this is so difficult. I don't want to lose him. Like this, it's been a year and, I think he's the one for me. He's my soulmate. So how do I do this? So I slowly started coming out to, families and friends. So what Parag had recommended and, which I also recommend to a lot of people is when you're about to come out to your parents, which was most important for me, start finding allies within your family. So I started, talking to cousins, people who are my age, younger cousins, older cousins, who could actually be allies because when my parents need those allies or need some validation about me, they could actually stand up and say, yep, I know about Vaibhav. This is absolutely normal. Don't have to worry about any of those things. That's what I started to do exactly. And then finally came the day when I was finishing an internship in the WHO in Geneva, and my parents were very excited to visit me. And they were leaving the last day in Switzerland, and I just sat in their bed and I told them, I have to tell you something important, and just started to bawl. And Parag had warned me again. This guy was so helpful and helping plan this entire day. I was freaking out. I was like, I cannot do this, but he was like, you got this.
It's so great that you had somebody by your side to help you through that process.
Absolutely, Farhan. And I can't tell you the week before, Parag and I were having so many fights. And remember, Parag, we had gone together.
You were just really scared.
So scared. I was just like nervous.
And we've all been there for sure.
Oh, it was so difficult. And one thing that he had told me was, don't cry, be brave, because if there's slightest of doubt in their minds, if you start crying, they'll be like, oh, he's possibly not sure, or he's very unhappy with his life, which is why, he's sharing this, but he's obviously crying. So, but I definitely told me, don't cry, but I just couldn't help myself. I started to bawl and I told my parents, I'm gay. And my father, immediately came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, beta, which means son, everything's going to be okay. We are with you. My mom, on the other hand, didn't even know what the word meant. Now, she comes from a very small town in Uttar Pradesh around Lucknow. So she absolutely had no frame of reference. That led to a series of uncomfortable, questions for several hours. And I remember that day, that was the most uncomfortable, I think, for a day of my life.
There's a lot of awkward conversations for sure. Yeah, I've been there. I recognize that conversation really well.
Yeah, so it was, and you can imagine, I'm pretty sure you must have felt as awkward as I did that day. And I was like, if I just back down right now, I don't think I'll be able to explain it to them. So I have to do it tonight. So we sat down at around 12 a.m. It was like they were packing their bags for the next morning's flight. And I think that until 2, 3 a.m., we just talked, and it was difficult for my parents. And at the end of the night, my mom said something very poignant. She said, beta, which means son, she said, beta, I think I failed as a parent. And I was like, why are you saying that? This is heartbreaking. Are you saying this because I'm gay? She said, no, beta, I'm saying this because, it took you 26 years to share such a big truth of your life. So I think I failed as a parent that I couldn't give you that space, that comfort that you could come to me. So from now onwards, I will do the worrying and you were the child, you will do the relaxing. Don't ever worry about it. And I can't tell you, Farhan, I felt like the weight of the universe was taken off my shoulders. And I slept like a baby that night, and my parents didn't sleep a beat. And it was very difficult. The next few months were very difficult for them. But things change, times change. We got married. They were there. They were happy. They gave their blessings. We are right now in Bogota, Colombia.
Hold that thought. I'm going to come to that in just a second, because
Yes.
I want to rewind and press play. But what I love about both your stories is that eventually you were both met with love and acceptance by both parents, and that's great. And this being Pride Month is pretty significant for both of you. And let's go back to June 2012. Parag, it's your first Pride and you're marching. You're not just marching, you're dancing. It almost feels like, from what I read, you were performing, you were doing a show, and you were going around to different people at the Pride Parade and kind of dancing with people. And then what happens?
Yeah, so Vaibhav and I have different recollections of that weekend, because remember, I was marching in the parade and there were 500,000 people in Washington, D.C. who would come for the parade. So what I was doing, the theme that year of our float was a wedding barat, because it was during the fight for marriage equality. Marriage equality wasn't legal yet across
the United States. United States, though.
This is in the United States, yes. In Washington, D.C., June 9th, 2012. And I was marching with an organization called Kush, DC. Kush is the Hindi word for happy. And so it was a clever little pun on gay. And we're an LGBT community organization in DC. And my friend Piyush had just become president of the organization. He called me a few weeks before the parade and said, hey, would you march with us? And I said, I'm really not a parade kind of guy. Like, I tend to watch the parade, not be in it. But I said, what's your idea? He said, well, we're going to do a wedding float. We're going to do a barat, an Indian style wedding where boy, girl, grooms and brides will march together and we'll play Bollywood music and we'll do it like an Indian wedding barat. And I said, wow, that sounds awful, because number one, I'm single, so I'm going to be the only one by myself, and everybody's going to be coupled up, so I'll stand out. And number two, it's going to be like 100 degrees in June in DC, and you want me to wear a sherwani and like all this heavy Indian clothing. And Piyush was like, no, Parag, it's okay. We actually want you to march and lead our float, and you can wear shorts and a t-shirt. So I was like, I kind of like that. I like being the leader. So I went online and I bought a really cute t-shirt that said Desi on it, and I put on some shorts. And I went to the parade. And I want to say that morning, that Saturday morning of the parade, I was tired. I was a little bit hungover. I didn't really want to go. So I almost flaked. I almost just skipped out on going. And sometimes even today, I wake up in a nightmare in a cold sweat thinking, what would my life be today if I had not gotten to the parade that day? So moral of the story, kids,
always go to the parade.
Always go to the parade. Even if you're
so that
hungover,
day,
apparently.
So that day we were playing Bollywood music and dancing, and the crowd was loving it. Like, they were just loving everything about our float. And I would look in the audience and I would look for anybody who looked Desi. And if they were Desi, I would run up to them and I would start dancing. Apparently, one of the people I danced with for like a few seconds, I guess, that day was Vaibhav. But I didn't know it, because that Saturday, my friends had come into town. We were hanging out. Sunday comes by. And then Sunday night, I'm getting ready to go to sleep. And I get a notification on Facebook that says, Vaibhav Jain has poked you. And my first thought was, who the hell is Vaibhav Jain? And my second thought was, who pokes on Facebook? Like, I didn't even know that feature still existed. So I deleted the notification. I went to sleep. I didn't think of it. I woke up in the morning on Monday, looked at my phone. Again, Vaibhav Jain has poked you. I deleted it, got showered, went to work, turned on my computer at the office, turned on Facebook, and yet again, Vaibhav Jain has poked you a third time.
In retrospect, I think that was really creepy.
Yeah, it was really creepy. So I sent him a private message on Facebook, and I simply wrote, are you just going to keep poking me, or do you have something to say for yourself? And about an hour later, I get this very long message in response from him. But before I can see the message, I notice he's attached a photo to his message, and it's a photo from the parade of me. Not a photo of me with the entire Kush DC float. It's a photo of just me, like a close-up shot of me. So now we're on like different level of stalkerness. And before I call,
I'm too happy though.
We'll get to the happy part.
Wait a second. Who took that picture? Vaibhav, did you actually take that picture?
Yes,
I took it. Yeah.
Oh, so you took that picture and you sent it to him. Okay, cool.
Oh, I think it's worth looking at the picture, because Farhan, when you see it, even you'll be like, what the hell is this?
I have seen it. I've seen it on Instagram. I know exactly the picture. I mean, I was creeping your pages to research and prepare for this, so that's a different kind of creeping. I'll call that research, but I did see that, and that's why I bring it up. But it's interesting because Vaibhav, you went through such great lengths. I mean, I've never, been that bold as far as asking. I mean, I'm at the point right now where I'm thinking of contacting Seema Auntie on like Indian matchmaking for assistance.
Save your pennies.
Save your pennies.
But I think I'm going to pick up some tips from you today. So keep going. What happened next?
Yeah, so for me, Farhan, it was my first time at a Pride parade. Never been to one in, Delhi because of fear being outed. So I was like, okay, you know what? Let's see what this thing is all about. Found out, there's a South Asian group, and I was so excited. I'm like, oh my God, I finally get to see people who are just like me, who look like me, and are so proud of their identities, and they'll all be marching. And in typical Desi, fashion, these guys were supposed to be third. They ended up being third to last because they were running late. And so I
don't think we were running late. I think the organizers of the parade stuck us in the ethnic ghetto at the end of the parade. That's what I think happened.
So whatever be, and I'm sweaty, I'm tired, it's 100 Fahrenheit outside, but I am just excited. Like the energy, and this one, the energy that an entire Pride parade is something different. And I was experiencing it for the first time, and it was beautiful. I see this guy now, and I'm like, oh my God, he's so cute. Who is this guy? So, and I was just randomly taking pictures, had a, nice digital camera that I just bought. I'm like, I'm going to use this 2012. So I'm taking pictures, and, when I come back home, didn't think much of it. I'm going through pictures. I'm like, who is this guy? He seems really sweet and, very cute. And there was a moment that we shared, and he doesn't obviously remember it. I remember it. I remember saying the word Oi Desi, and, he heard that. He came up to me, danced for a few seconds, and went away. And I'm looking through these pictures, and he just seemed, I don't know what was about him, and I really cannot explain it for him, why him, because I took so many pictures that day. And I was like, you know what, let me just look him up on Queer Desi's page. Now, this was a closed group because so many of the members were still not out. So I went to the closed group, and I started looking at people's faces, and I didn't find him there. And I was like, oh my. Now, I was like, it's a Saturday, I have time. Let me see who this guy really is. So let me do some research. So I actually started clicking into individual Facebook, group members' profiles to see if they'd posted pictures. I kid you not, I think last but one or second, and there were 200 members, last but one or second, the last one had tagged a picture of him. And I'm like, oh, this is the guy. So I clicked his Facebook profile. He has an open profile. Saw all the work that he had done for the administration and, just in LGBTQ and API rights. And it was very impressive. I'm like, oh, let me just, reach out to him. Again, I was very awkward, and I was like, I don't know what to say and what to say to this guy. He'd be like, who the hell are you? So I'm like, let me just use this random feature poke and see, if he responds. To my surprise, he didn't. And I'm like, let me keep persisting. Let's see if he responds, what's the harm? And I send him a message. Do you want to share what the message was?
Yeah, so after I sent him that terse note of like, do you have anything to say for yourself, or are you just going to keep poking me? He sent me this long message with the photo attached. And the message was actually very beautiful and very typical of Vaibhav, what I learned. Very sweet. He said, Dear Parag, my name is Vaibhav Jain, and I am from India, and I just attended my first gay pride parade. He said, I was so excited to see the Queer Desi group march because I've always been afraid to march in a parade myself, and it made me feel really excited to see other Desis out and proud. He said, for a moment, you danced with me, and I felt like I needed to know who you were. And when I finally found out your name, I looked you up, and I read about all this work that you had done in politics, in the Obama administration, trying to fight for the rights of the LGBT community, for the rights of the Asian American community. And he ended by saying, it just makes me feel really proud that somebody who is from the same motherland as me, but who grew up here in this country, has decided to dedicate their life to making it easier for people like us. He said, so if you're ever up for it, I would love to take you out for a coffee or a chai and say thank you.
Boom.
Pretty
Very
good.
smooth.
And
Very
I was
smooth.
like,
I love that.
He appealed to my ego, which you can never go wrong with doing that.
Stroke
I
him a
replied
little
back
bit,
to him and I
compliment a
said-
little bit, and then just throw in the chai
and again,
request.
like I said, I was not looking to date because I was still very new to
He
this
was trying to
country.
make friends.
I was just trying to make friends, and I'm like,
Right.
and I don't know, like this is also, it also talks. At some point in time, I also want to talk about how there was, xenophobia. I wouldn't say
there's a lot of racism in the
Right.
gay culture, right? Especially like in places like DC, because it's very segregated, right? White gays don't really associate with people of color gays. And I think he was feeling very frustrated with the LGBT scene in DC in his first year. But I think the more important part of this is that I responded and I said, I thank you very much. That's a very kind message. I don't tend to meet strangers, but if you ever need a friend, someone to talk to, here's my phone number, call me. And the reason why I said that message, Farhan, is because I started thinking about my parents. And I started thinking about what it was like when they came to the United States in 1972. There were very few Desi people. And my dad once told me, he said, back then, you would literally show up in a town and you would open the phone book. Remember when they had phone books?
Right.
And you would look up Indian last names like Singh or Patel or Mehta or Shah. And you would cold call people and just say, hi, I'm new in the country. I just arrived. Can I come over for dinner? Or can I meet you? Or can you give me some advice on where to get Indian groceries? And that's how they built community. And I felt a little bit like that's what Vaibhav was reaching out to do. He was trying to build community.
Mm-hmm. And he found it in you, and he found a whole lot more. So tell me about the chai date. What was the first date like? Where did you go?
It wasn't chai. It was really terrible Thai food.
Terrible Thai food. So, back and forth, we decide to meet on June 12th. So on the evening of June 12th, I said, there's this.
So that's the anniversary date of when you first met at the Pride Parade.
Yes.
Okay.
June 12th. That's
the Pride Parade is the 9th, the 12th is our first date.
Yeah. So I reached out to him and he's like, yeah. And, we met outside my college, one of the dorms. And we went for this Thai place, and the food was terrible. But the conversation was so wonderful.
Well, let me tell you why the conversation, and this goes back to your Seemanji thing. So before Seemanji, there was Vijay Uncle. Vijay Uncle's my dad. And my dad, in addition to being a surgeon and many other things, he is a matchmaker. Like, he had started his own matchmaking app. He was going around to all these Desi conventions, and he was talking to young people about dating and sexuality and about, being more open and sort of dating around. And so he did all this matchmaking work. About a year before I met Vaibhav, I sat my dad down. I said, Dad, you help all these young people find their matches. Why have you never set me up with anybody? Is it because I'm gay? He's like, no, it's because you've never asked me. He said, I would love to set you up. I meet so many wonderful gay people. I'd love to set you up on some dates. So he did. He set me up on 3 or 4 dates, and they were always with like these doctors, Republican, conservative, whatever, totally not my types. But my dad has this thing that Seemanji should probably learn from, which is he does this feedback session afterwards. After the date's over, he speaks to both parties and gets their honest feedback on what happened.
Okay.
So right before I went on this date with Vaibhav, I had gotten my feedback session from my dad. And he said, Parag, these guys that you've gone out with, here's what they say about you. They say you're very talented, you're very smart, but number one, you talk too much, you dominate the conversation. Number two, you only talk about politics and from a very lefty liberal point of view, which is kind of a turnoff. And number three, you're not always the most humble person in the conversation. You need to make more effort to listen to others, instead of just talking all the time. So that's what was in my head when I went on this date with Vaibhav. So if you remember on that date, I didn't say anything. I literally just sat there.
I think we both recollected very differently.
We talked for an hour.
There were only 2 people there on that date, right?
Well, and of course, we're both from the same religion. We're both Jain.
Right.
And I'm not super religious the way he is, but he talked a lot about what Jainism means to me. And he started talking about his favorite aspects of the Jain mythology and how it intersects with the Hindu mythology. And it was all fascinating stuff. I found it really interesting to listen to, but I was literally the whole time don't speak. And apparently it worked because my dad's advice led me to 11 years with this guy.
Yeah, so right after the date, we went out and, I just didn't want to, let him go. So we hung out for a bit and,
he was like, do you want to see the view from my apartment?
I did see that because it was a nice view, but I wasn't getting there. Having said that, so I came back out and, we were just walking around, these areas. And then it suddenly started to rain. So we quickly ran down, and took shelter under a building.
It sounds like the perfect Bollywood scene from a
Well,
Bollywood
that's what
movie.
I said. I said, this feels like a Bollywood movie.
Like cue rainfall.
To which Vaibhav responded, oh, you like Bollywood? Because you couldn't believe that some ABCD like me growing up in this country, A, spoke Hindi, and B, watched Bollywood films. But I was like, no, I love Bollywood films.
Right.
So we started comparing our favorite Bollywood songs and our favorite movies.
Yeah.
And I told him about this film that I love called Pura Pashchim, which came out in the 1970s. It's like this great story about immigrants who leave India and come abroad. And then he started telling me about one of his favorite, and then he started to sing one of the songs from his favorite Bollywood movie. Now listen, Fran, I don't have like a checklist for the perfect guy, but if I did,
right,
top of the list would be a man who can sing to me, because I find that to be so beautiful, so sexy, so romantic. And he's got an amazing voice. And I think that was kind of the moment where, like, in my head, I sort of just think, oh, this could be the guy.
Oh, wow. So I have a question. Who was the first to say I love you?
Me. And shockingly, because you would think it's Veba wears his art on his sleeve, and I'm the more emotionless or logical one. But what happened was when we first started dating, Veba had all these girlfriends at school who were giving him advice about me. And they were telling him, don't call him, don't
Play cool.
play it cool, don't be clingy.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you already poked him 3 times on Facebook. There was no playing cool at that point.
I can't do that.
So literally, like, I think it was on the 3rd or 4th date where Veba just confesses to me, like, all my friends are telling me to do this, that. I'm not going to do that because I don't believe in playing games. I like you, and I'm going to tell you I like you. And when I like somebody, that means I want to talk to them and I want to see them. And it's interesting because I think from that first date to today, in the 11 years since that date, I don't think I've gone a day without speaking to you. And I think that is probably the key to a really healthy relationship. I never understand these people who are like, oh, I need distance from my person. I don't want distance. I want as much proximity as possible.
I love that. And so let's flash forward to who proposed and how that went down.
Well, that one's a little complicated for us.
It was very complicated.
So
okay.
We had decided in like 2014, 2 years into dating, that we were meant to be together. We had this conversation about breaking up was off the table. We were never going to break up. Like whatever we came through, we were going to fight through it together. And that's still our motto to this day, because there are going to be hard days too. What was the hard part was getting our parents on board. So my parents were bought in. Obviously, they wanted him to come out to his family, but they were pretty well bought in. But then he'd come out to his parents in Switzerland. And now, I told him when he came out, I said, don't mention me. Because if you mention me, then your parents are going to think that I've had some Svengali-like influence on you. And the reason you're gay is because of Parag. You're gay independent of me. Let's get to me later. So about 6 months after he came out, he started to broach the idea of like, there's this guy that I've been seeing and I really like him and I want to introduce him to you. And so his mom and dad actually had come for his graduation back before he came out, and I had actually spent time with them. So they knew me. They kind of liked me, actually. They thought I was his very good friend. But now they figured out that I was his boyfriend, and things got a little bit awkward. So a couple of years later, when they come for their big family vacation in America, they invited me to join them. And they didn't really know what to do with me because his older brother had just gotten married. So there's a new Bobby in the family. We all know who she is. But it was kind of like a hum apke hekon situation, which is like, who's this dude tagging along on our little vacation?
Does he stay in the same room as Vaibhav? Does he stay in the other room as Vaibhav? How are we supposed to treat him? So many things. It was so complicated.
And then, but it went fine because the truth of the matter is his family is, if I had to sum them up in one word, it's just pure love. They're just the kindest, most love. They don't know how to do anything but love, right? So they put aside all their awkwardness and they just treated me like I was their son. And that's pretty much how it worked. So then after that vacation, they invited me to India to visit them in Delhi. And we went for a week and spent some time in Delhi. And then my dad went, actually. At some point, my dad was making a trip to India. He hadn't gone back home in 25 years. And he called me right before he left. And he said, I said, Dad, are you going to go to Delhi? And he said, I wasn't planning on it, but do you want me to go to Delhi? And I said, yeah, Dad, I think it'd be really great if you sat down and met with Vaibhav's parents and had the conversation. Like, they are still very traumatized by the whole coming out thing. And I think given that you're 15 years ahead of them, it might be helpful for them to hear from you. And so he did. And what was amazing about that trip, my dad is not the greatest at sharing information. So I remember he landed in Delhi and then we didn't hear from him for 3 days.
Yeah.
For 3 days.
What the hell happened?
We didn't hear from his parents. We didn't hear from my parents.
And I think my parents were traveling at that time. So suddenly
there was like a media blackout of what happened
in
this 3-hour conversation that these people had. So finally, I called the right source, which is my mother, because if you want information, you go to mom. So I said, Mom, do you know what happened? And she said, yes, good news. Papa talked to Vaibhav's parents and he helped them understand. And they're now starting to have very serious conversations about the two of you and the two of you getting married and all these things. But his parents weren't there yet. Like in India, the idea of gay marriage was still so far removed from them. They'd never heard of such a thing. And so it took some time. So a year later, my mom flies to Delhi and she stays at their house for several days. And on her last day, Vaibhav's dad took her shopping and said, Didi, I want to buy you anything you want. What do you want? What clothes would you like? And she said, Bhai Sahab, I just want one thing. And can you give me one thing? He said, sure, what's the one thing? She said, I want my son's happiness. And your son makes him happy. So I need you to agree to let these two kids get married. And that started a chain of events that led to our parents going on a Caribbean cruise together. And during that cruise, I decided to ask, before I asked Vaibhav for marriage, I decided to ask his parents.
But you guys had talked about it at that point, hadn't you? Like
at that point, we already knew we were soulmates and we were going to be together, but
Yeah.
we wanted to do it the right way.
And we bought rings. So
We bought rings and
the way
everything.
we realized, we're like, we're both guys, so I don't want the other person to do it. If we do it together. Whoever decides to propose should have both rings. So there are very specific instructions on how a person.
You wanted me to propose.
No. So yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
sure.
He wanted the moment.
are we
So
talking like a flash mob proposal, or what were your
I would never have done a flash mob.
It was so before he actually proposed, this thing that Parag was mentioning on the cruise, he did a really beautiful thing. So remember, now we're on a cruise ship, there's no internet, it's like really, really bad. They're completely disconnected from technology. And he writes this beautiful message, on his phone, and he's like, I want you to translate this in Hindi, and if possible, give it to your parents and read it to them. And wasn't it the night that I came out? Was it the anniversary of the?
It was, I think, the anniversary of the 3-year anniversary
of when I came out to my parents. So he's like, it'll be so poignant if I actually ask your parents, tonight about this. So I did, and oh my God, remember like 2-3 hours, we were running around the ship trying to find a printer where I can print like the Hindi translation.
I remember we had to print 2 copies, one for mom and one for dad.
Oh my God, it was a lot, but we did it before 12 a.m. and we both went inside my
So we
parents.
knocked on their cabin door, we went inside, and I said, Mommy, Papa, actually at that time it was Uncle Auntie. Uncle Auntie, I have something I want to ask you. And I handed them both their sheets of paper. And Vaibhav's dad was fast. He read it quickly and he said, okay, yeah, man, everything's okay.
Yeah,
We'd been in
man.
Jamaica that day, so
So he was
you were
using
in
a lot
Jamaica
of
that day? Okay,
he
that
was
makes
using
sense.
a lot of yaman.
I needed context for that. So
Yeah. And but his mom took longer and she read it very thorough. I mean, that's how she is, right? She really considered it. She didn't make a split-second decision. She considered it, she thought about it. I think she got a little emotional. And then she put the paper down and she looked at me and she said in Hindi, all any mother wants is for her child to be happy. And you make my son happy. So my answer is yes.
Wow.
And so we had our parents' approval, and fast forward to September again. I had no idea. We were still like playing chicken. I'm like, you propose. He's like, no, you propose. So Parag was turning 40 that September, and we decided to surprise him. So 2 of his best friends and me, we surprised him and took him to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Literally to a point that he didn't even know where we were flying. We blindfolded him, took him to the airport, made sure that he didn't even find out, what flight he was sitting on. He finally figured it out. And we had a wonderful, wonderful time, just the 4 of us, hung out. And little did I know that, the day after his birthday, he wanted to propose. And actually, weren't you planning to do it on your birthday?
I was planning to do my birthday,
something
but
really funny
the day
happened.
of my birthday, he cut his finger washing dishes, and I thought, oh, he'll kill me if I propose today because every photo of the ring will be with a cut on his finger and a Mickey Mouse band-aid. So I had to postpone my plan to the day after, but the day after I actually decided to do it sunrise because I wanted to start the first day of my.
They were dress up nicely, make sure. I'm like, dude, it's 6 a.m. I'm viewing for a
But
sunrise.
the reason was I wanted to start the first day of the second half of my life with him as my fiance. So at sunrise on the day after my 40th birthday, we went up to a hilltop. And what I did is Facebook Live was a brand new feature at that time. It hadn't been used very much at that time. So I turned on Facebook Live. This is at 6 a.m. Mountain Time. And I proposed to him. What we didn't expect is that all of our friends on the East Coast, it was 8 o'clock in the morning for them. So they were all getting up and starting their day. And they were all watching this thing in real time.
Wow.
So
did they know what was, so nobody knew this was happening though?
No, the only people who knew were the 2 friends who were with us who were filming this. And after the proposal was over and the camera was off, Vaibhav was like, oh my God, we gotta call everybody, we gotta tell everybody. And my friend Priska, who was holding the phone and had seen how many people had logged in, she said, guys, I don't think you need to tell anybody because I think like several thousand people have just watched this happen live.
Jeez.
That's the cutest thing. In the ring box, Parag loves Taco Bell like most Desi people in America. So in the ring box, Taco Bell had this very cute sauce.
Hot sauce.
Which said, will you marry me? And he had that. I'm like,
because he'd already seen the ring. So there's no surprise in the ring. So the surprise was hot sauce.
Really, really cute. So, we exchanged, he put a ring on my finger and I'm like, did you get my ring? He's like, yes, I did. So then I, put the ring in his finger. It was just perfect. It was the most beautiful proposal ever.
That's amazing. I love that. Let's go to the wedding day. And when I was looking at the pictures and the videos from my observations, it looked like you had some old traditions and some new ones. How was it important to you to maintain some of the traditions of the Jain religion in your ceremonies? And what did you do to create your ceremonies to make it unique for you?
Yeah. So, for me, I'm a very spiritual person, and, a big part of me is my faith. So I wanted to do it traditionally because I'm like, when my brother got married, any of my cousins got married, family members got married, they did it in a traditional Jain fashion. So why couldn't I? So Parag and I talked about it, and we're like, Parag's like, okay, I'll give you this, you can plan the wedding ceremony. So I was like, who, performs Jain weddings in the US? And I had no idea. So I literally searched on Google Jain weddings USA. And I kid you not, there was a website called jainweddingsusa.com. There is this one gentleman, really wonderful gentleman, Ashok Sangvi, who lives in Indiana, and he actually is a chartered accountant, but he actually performs. He's a Jain, a member of the Jain community, but on the side, he actually performs Jain weddings. So I reached out to him and I said, Uncle, we're interested.
Dad reached out.
Actually, yeah. So I told your dad because I was too scared to ask.
Well, what happened is at that point, my dad had tried several other Hindu and Jain temples, and they'd all basically laughed him off the phone because they said, "What are you talking about?
It's an abomination.
This can't happen. It's an abomination." To which my dad's response was, "Why are you using words like abomination? That's from the Bible."
I was going to say,
we're dharmic people. So when Beba found this person, he asked my dad to call. And so my dad actually reached out to Ashok Uncle.
So Ashok Uncle was great, but what we also realized, Farhan, is that Indian wedding ceremonies and Jain wedding ceremonies are very sexist. Like it's like woman is sort of like treated like a commodity, like, oh, we're giving it away and all of that. So we didn't want any of that. We wanted to be as gender neutral as possible and be respectful of both the grooms. So the way
we also wanted to elevate the role of women in our ceremony, because we thought one way to respond to the sexism is obviously to make it gender neutral. The other way is to make sure that women are playing a very central role in every aspect of the ceremony, which we did.
So, like one tradition in our Desi weddings is Kanyadan, which means giving away of the bride. So we changed that to Vardan. Var in Hindi means groom, and Dan is giving away, and Vardan together is a blessing from God. So we changed that to Vardan. And so in the ceremony, my parents actually gave me away to his family, and his parents gave him away to my family. So it was really beautiful. And the cool thing about this entire thing was, now Ashok Sangvi is an older gentleman. He's in his 60s, really kind man. And I sat down with him and I said, Uncle, this is what we want to do. And he loved it. I said, Uncle, I hope you don't think that, I'm trying to change traditions or be, disrespectful to my religion. He said, absolutely not. Our religion doesn't say anything of that nature. It talks about love. It talks about bringing love together, and you're not doing anything different. So, let's talk about this and, let's come to a solution. So we did that. Now, at the end, towards the end of the wedding ceremony, we do something called as Akhand Sabhagyavati, which means, they ask a woman for the women of the house bless the newly marrieds for a long life. So we actually changed that, and what do we call it? We call it Chiranjeevi, which means sort of like the same thing, but not like women-centric. Say, live a long life. But what we did was we actually had two same-sex couples come up on stage and whisper some advice for the newlyweds, for the two of us. So a gay couple and a lesbian couple who are very dear friends of mine, us, and older in our community, they actually came and they whispered marital advice, and it was just so beautiful. And I think we just loved it, and we kept it short. We knew that the wedding ceremonies are long. We wanted to be meaningful. We wanted people to pay attention.
And we wanted it in English because we wanted to make sure that we understood what we were saying. Yeah. And so everything was scripted by us, approved by our officiant. But I have a lot of the people who attended our wedding told me afterwards that of all the weddings they've been to, Desi weddings, this was the most meaningful, not because it was a same-sex wedding and because we were breaking barriers, but because we put so much effort into explaining the real meaning behind everything. Yeah. Why do we say these things? Why do we do these things? Really, and I give a lot of credit to Beba for thinking through that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you did it in such a personalized way that it created intimacy between yourselves as well as your guests and your families. You created memories. Yes, you were trailblazing. I assume it was this officiant's first same-sex marriage.
Well, what's interesting is when my dad called him, he said, would you be willing to do my son's wedding? He said, yeah, of course, of course. He said, just so you know, it's a gay wedding. And it was like kismet, because this guy, Ashok Sangvi, he has a daughter who's a human rights lawyer. And about 3 days before my dad called, the daughter had asked her father, Dad, would you ever perform a gay wedding? And he said, no, of course not. And she said, why? And he couldn't answer the question why. And it had been rolling around in his brain for 3 days when my dad called out of the blue and asks him for the first time in his life to perform a gay wedding. So he kind of thought it was like the universe trying to tell him something, that you need to do this. And I have to tell you, we were still very much in touch with him, and we love Ashok Uncle.
The love that he has, like every year on our anniversary, he'll send us a message It's like, you guys are so lucky. Just make sure that you look at each other, thank each other for, all that you've achieved together, and you should be very proud. And he's
He told me he's performed hundreds of weddings. He's only cried at one, and that was ours. Because at the end of our wedding, if you watch in the video, he gets very emotional because he realizes like this is a game changer. This changes everything. It opens up the doors of the mandir, the doors of the temple, to millions of people who've been left out.
Yeah.
And that's what faith is supposed to do. Faith is supposed to invite people in.
And what I love about your story is whenever there was confusion, conflict, whether it was your coming out, the struggles of your parents, and with this officiant, love was the solution to every struggle.
Most
And
definitely.
that theme carried on specifically with your dad, Parag, when he said his speech. And as I said earlier in the intro, that was the first time I learned about you two when I watched the video, and it was so heartfelt, so honest. He talked about his struggles from at one time being someone who was homophobic to not only accepting you, but leaning on his love for you to realize that regardless of who you were, he still loved you. He became a champion for you, his son, as well as your partner and now husband. And I want to say that I was an absolute mess in tears when I was watching this video, as I'm sure many people were. And that said, I will leave the link for the YouTube video for the speech in the description in the episode so that other people can get a chance to watch this. But I'm going to warn you, you're going to need a box of Kleenex. You're going to cry, and consider yourself warned. And that said, this video had such a far reach. And as I was scrolling through the comments in the post, in the video on YouTube, I came across this one comment that this lady wrote, and it really struck me. So I'm going to share it with everybody now. And this lady wrote, in referring to Parag's father, "This man spoke my words out of my heart. Words I said and things I did after finding out my amazing, handsome son is gay. I'm a devout Christian. He was raised in church. We were there every time the doors opened. Then my son came out after college and having a girlfriend all through college. I never suspected when he was growing up. People said I should have seen something and tried to get him help. I don't agree. In my religion, homosexuality is not accepted, and I hid it for a long time because I didn't want my friends to know. Finally, after him going through the exact same things this young man did when he realized he must come out to his dad and I, it was a huge shock. I won't lie, but I finally realized I loved my son and accepted him for who he is, a very successful man that lives a great life. He has a life partner that I love as another son. Please, if you're out there struggling with this issue with your child, yet being a Christian or whatever religion you follow, just accept them, love them, and most of all, don't be ashamed of them. God created each of us the way we are. I love my son, and nothing will change that. Thank you for posting this amazing video for others of us out here who have walked in your shoes."
Oh my God.
Beautiful.
That's beautiful.
I mean, what do you think when you hear comments like that?
What I think is that love creates a chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So when one person has the courage to step out in the light and in their truth, it gives somebody else the courage, just as my coming out helped Vebhav's coming out. My dad's story helped this woman articulate her story, which will hopefully help others. We hear stories like this wherever we go. And I think something like 40 million people now have watched one of the versions of that speech. But what always amazes me is the cultural transgression of it. Because even though it's a Desi uncle speaking in a Desi uncle accent and a very Desi uncle style, we're told by people in every part of the world. A group of El Salvadorians reached out to us and said, your dad's speech has been translated in Spanish and is now being used by lesbians as a tool for coming out to their families.
In our work, we've actually met friends who are like, you guys don't know me, but we actually, I know of you already. I use your video to come out to my family. And it was so beautiful. And, Parag talks about love. Definitely. I think love started a chain reaction. But I think, Farhan, what also was very evident in that video was vulnerability. He was in his total vulnerable self, revealing some of the deepest, secrets of his life, of himself as a human being, of his son. He talked about, I don't know if you see the full video on YouTube, Parag had a very straight face, and he was actually very upset because his father.
I wasn't upset. I was in shock.
Shock. Yeah.
Because it's my wedding day. We've got 500 of our closest friends enjoying a reception, and my dad is sharing all these very deeply personal, private, horrible moments of my life. And I didn't like it. Actually, I'll tell you, quite honestly, I didn't like the speech that night. It was the next morning, as we were saying goodbye to our friends at brunch, that one of my college classmates came up to me. My friend Manisha came up to me and said, Parag, I want you to know that last night when your dad was giving his toast, I wasn't watching him, I was watching you. And I can imagine how it must have felt for you to hear your dad say those things in a public forum. But I want you to know that that toast wasn't for you and Beba, and it wasn't for us. That toast was for all the Indian uncles and aunties in the room, his peers, because what he was trying to do, and what he did very successfully, is he was giving them permission to change. He was giving them permission to set aside antiquated beliefs and homophobia and be different. And when Manisha told me that, that's when my entire attitude about that speech changed.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
It is. And the ripple effect of that speech continues today. And you can see how that chain reaction, like this woman and what she wrote, in the changing of her ideas and how it'll impact her community and where she lives and so on and so on. But, it must, I'm sitting here and watching this whole experience as an observer, but to see how it must be for you having been in it and going through it, it must be like incredibly exciting and I don't know, I can't even find the language for it, because it's just so beautiful to watch and witness from my perspective, and I'm sure many others.
I mean, Farhan, what I want you listeners to know is, while a lot of the attention is focused on my dad and his words, there were 3 other parents involved in that who may not have spoken the words, but who through their actions, my mother, my in-laws, who through their actions show us every single day that they're leading with love. And speaking of chain reactions, when we originally planned our wedding, we wanted to do it in India. And we asked Veva's parents, can we do this in Delhi? And they were not comfortable at the time, because this was 2018-19. Homosexuality had only just been recently decriminalized in India. And they were like, no, it's not going to be safe to do this in India. The vendors will harass us. The police might harass us. It's better to stick to America where it's safe. After his parents saw the wedding in Texas, in a rural, small community of Central Texas, after they saw the kind of love and the way we were embraced by the community, the day after our wedding, Veva's dad pulled me aside and said, Beta, when you come to Delhi next time, you let me know. We're going to throw a huge wedding reception for you. And 6 months to the day of our wedding, we had on November 30th, 2019, we had a huge wedding reception at the Lalit Hotel in Delhi. The reason why that hotel is significant is because the owner of the Lalit company, he passed away, but his son, Keshav Suri, is openly gay and has started an LGBT foundation called the Keshav Suri Foundation. And he told us that ours was the first same-sex wedding to be celebrated in one of his hotel chains. So the idea that in India, we were able to do this, we were able to do it with love, that's the chain reaction that my parents helped catalyze with his parents.
That's amazing. And currently, you 2 are in Bogota, Colombia.
We are, yes.
Yes. And tell us all a little bit of what took you there.
Yeah. So, very early in our relationship, we talked about, family, what matters to us, and we both love kids. So we wanted to have kids. Now, the way we have kids is obviously, something that we didn't know how to, go about. Because again, in our queer community, what I've seen, and I don't know, but I think that's your experience too, that, we have gay friends, they get married, and then suddenly one day on social media, they're like, oh yeah, we're dads. And we have a baby, or we're moms, we have a baby. And they're like, how did you do this? Can somebody talk about it? Is there a pamphlet I can read? Where am I going? What am I doing? So we had absolutely no idea how to do this. So, a friend of ours, his name is Pratap, and we give him all this credit of, where we're at in our lives right now. And we talked to him and said, hey, we want to have children, and what's your take on it? And he has 3 beautiful children through surrogacy, he and his husband. And he said, I know of this really wonderful, company, surrogacy agency who does this. They're based out of India, but they do surrogacy all over the world. And, we first looked at things in the US, and it was really, really expensive. And I think we couldn't have afforded it. So one of the options that we found was in Bogota, Colombia. Now, not just because of the cost, but also because there's this clinic that we've been working with, which specializes, surrogacy for same-sex couples, and they've been doing it for almost 3 decades. The founder, Dr. Pedro, we had a conversation with him just as a chat, like initial chat, and he said, I think his brother was Gabriel, and he's like, 30 years ago, I remember I saw my brother who was openly gay, but did not have the resources, did not have, the tools to become a father if he wanted to be a single dad or, have a child with his partner. So he's like, I wanted to start something that could change, lives of LGBTQ people. So he started this, wonderful clinic called Selaham. And through that, we have 2 wonderful babies, one a baby girl named Pariniti that you mentioned 2 months ago, and our son Vivan, who was born 10 days ago. And it completely changed our lives. Like we are, I think, Farhan, the way, again, I was not sure what to expect. And I remember Parag's friend, we were at some gathering and, he mentioned it to us. He knew that we were pregnant. And he said, Vaibhav, you will not realize how much love you have in your heart until you have a child. You think you have all the love in the world, for your spouse, for your parents. And when you have your child and when you see your child for the first time, there's a different kind of love that you will experience. Your heart will open in a different way that you've never imagined. And I tell you, Parag, I think that's what, I don't know what you experienced, but that was my experience when I saw Pari and when I saw Rohan.
Yeah, I mean, I think up until now, Farhan, our whole story has been about love and finding acceptance and leading with love. But then there comes a question of gratitude, which is how do you express gratitude for everything that we've received from our community, from our family, from our friends, and of course, from our parents. And I think the best way to pay that forward is to pay that love forward. And to us, at least for us, becoming fathers was the best way to do that. We have great parents. They have given us so much. And now we are in the position to give that love and that support and all that learning to these 2 children. And they are amazing. And every day I look at these kids and I'm in amazement of like how interesting they are and how clever they are and how much they change. And they're ours. And
I think we also give a lot of credit to both the surrogates who carried our children, because for us, we were, I'll be honest, like we knew we were pregnant, we were excited, but we were, 5 hours away in Washington, D.C. while these women were carrying our children. And, they changed their lives completely for 9 months. So I think I remember, Parag, to our second surrogate, when she was parting where she said goodbye to us, I wrote to her in Spanish. I just used Google Translate and I said, I hope you realize this, that, you changed 9 months of your life so that I can have a gift for a lifetime. So for that, I thank you, because nobody does it. Like even for the largest amounts of money, nobody would do it, because it's, giving so much of a big commitment in your life. So we both owe so much to our surrogates.
I love it. And you 2 lead such busy lives with your general work and your advocacy, but you decided to have 2 babies at once. I mean, you must really like a challenge. What was the decision behind that?
Well, we couldn't have predicted it was going to happen.
We actually didn't plan it this way.
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to happen 10 weeks apart.
Yeah.
It was, you kind of go by the luck of fate, right? There's so much we can control with science and technology, especially with surrogacy and in vitro fertilization. What we couldn't predict is the timing, because it turned out Vaibhav was able to create 3 embryos and I was able to create 2. Unfortunately, his first embryo resulted in a miscarriage. The second one didn't take. My first one didn't take. So we were down to our last 2 embryos. And it happened to be that those are the 2 that stuck. And those are the 2 that became our babies. And they just happen to be 10 weeks apart.
Yeah.
So we call them our Irish twins. And we're actually going to raise them as twins. Because that was what was meant to be.
Yeah.
I love it. And it does take a village to raise a family and children. And I can see from your Instagram post the beautiful pictures of your parents who are now grandparents who are there to support this whole journey and process. What's it like having them there with you right now at this time?
Oh my God. I mean, Parag, I let Parag speak, but, my parents had decided, to come for 3 months, and they've recently moved to, Canada where my brother is. And I think it's been amazing just to see the amount of energy and the knowledge that my mom brings to the table, after having raised us and then, helping raise my brother's kids. But also it was very interesting. My mom had a very interesting conversation with me right before we moved to, we came to Bogota. And she said, Vaibhav, I understand that both of you are, men of science, and you both are, really intelligent. So I want to make sure that these kids are raised by some tradition, but also science. So I will defer to both of you. You tell me how you'd like me to do whatever you'd like me to do, and I will help you and I will support you in your journey. And I think that's what my parents have, supported us the most by, not challenging our decisions, but supporting our decisions and also helping us enhance our decisions. Like, I'll tell you a simple thing. Like, my mother is like a baby whisperer. Everybody in my family just calls my mom saying, hey, we're having a baby. Can you please come help her? So the first few months of, taking care of the baby, giving them this beautiful massages that my mom does for the babies, I think just it's such a personal thing for us. And, I see that in my mom, and I see my mom doing this to our kids, and it's so special. Every morning we see that, and it's so special. So it's been amazing.
I would agree with all that. I think for anybody who's seen the video of my dad giving a wedding toast and been impressed by him, that is nothing compared to watching my dad sitting on the floor with his 2-month-old granddaughter and helping her learn how to use her foot strength to push herself on a mat down the floor. I videotaped that with tears in my eyes. That was more moving to me than the wedding toast, because I was like, here is this man who is just so invested in these kids. And I'll also say about both of our parents, one thing we were maybe nervous about is that obviously one child is biologically related to Vaibhav and one child is biologically related to me. And then the egg donor is the same. So the kids are actually biologically related to each other. Yeah. And we don't share which one is which, but our parents know, right? Our parents know which one is biologically whose. And we were a little bit nervous that would the grandparents favor the grandchild that's biologically theirs? And the answer is no. Absolutely. In fact, I think it's actually been the other way around. I think in some ways they favor the other one more. And in fact, even between us, I think I favor the one that's biologically his and he favors one, because it kind of makes sense, right? It's the laws of attraction. As much as I love and adore Veba, what I see in that child is I see him. And I think vice versa. So there's lots of ways to build a family. There's no one way to do it. We've chosen surrogacy. We've also talked about adoption, and I don't know. I don't even know that we're done yet, because as far as I'm concerned, 3 is also.
Honey, I'm done. No, this is
ask him anymore.
We'll save that conversation for another podcast. But if you do decide to have more children, you can guarantee I'm going to be wanting to talk to you a few years from now, so that we could follow up. Because I am going to be following this story, because I have been since your wedding day, and I'm invested. You mentioned that after your wedding, you went to Delhi to have a reception party. And during that time, you went to the Indian consulate to register yourselves as a couple. And you were denied. And the reason being was that you were a same-sex couple. And so in response to that, will you tell me and share with us, what was your reaction, and what steps did you take after that?
So let me just correct the story a little bit. What happened was we got married in Texas. 6 months later, we had a wedding reception in Delhi. At the time in India, homosexuality had been decriminalized by the Supreme Court. The 2 lawyers who argued that case are themselves a lesbian couple. They're in a relationship, Manika Guruswamy and Arundhati Kachu. And they had been named by Time magazine as among the 100 most influential people of the year that year. So Vaibhav had seen that article and he showed it to me. And Vaibhav being Vaibhav, going back to sort of his Facebook stalkery ways, he found Manika and Arundhati on Facebook, and he randomly messaged them and said, we are such big admirers of you, and we are so grateful to the 2 of you for what you did in India.
We are able to have this reception because of people like you. You made this okay for us.
So he invited them to come to our wedding reception, 2 lawyers that we've never met before. And I thought he was crazy, but of course, Vaibhav is always like crazy like a fox, because it worked. They said yes. And not only did they show up to our wedding reception, they actually asked if they could say a few words at the end. So they got up in front of all of our friends and family and gave this beautiful message where they basically said that what Parag and Vaibhav have done is the most ordinary thing you can do. They are 2 people, they met, they fell in love, and they got married. What you all have done, the friends, the family, the teachers, the classmates, is extraordinary, because you have reached into your heart and put aside thousands of years of prejudice and of religious bigotry, and you have found a way to love and embrace these people. So hats off to you. So it was at that reception that we met Manika and Arundhati. And then a few months later, they reached out to us and they said, look, we're thinking about what the next step is in gay rights in India, and marriage equality is top of the agenda. would you be willing to join us in a series of test cases? We're going to be challenging several laws, including the Special Marriage Act of India, the Hindu Marriage Act, and then there's this other law that's not as well known called the Foreign Marriage Act. So the Foreign Marriage Act is a law that was passed by Parliament in 1969, and it's very simple. It says if you are an Indian citizen, which Vaibhav is, and you travel abroad for study or for work, and you get married while you're in a different country, then that marriage is automatically legally recognized in India. Whether a marriage in New York is a marriage in New Delhi, it's fairly simple. Most countries have a law like this on the books because it accepts that we don't need to like get married every time we move to a different country. So, of course, in 1969, nobody contemplated that today there are 32 countries around the world that recognize same-sex marriage, including Canada, the United States, Mexico, and in Asia, Taiwan. So Mehrnika and Arundhati had this brilliant idea of like, what if you guys were to use your US marriage license and go into an Indian consulate in New York City and apply for registration of marriage?
So that's what we decided of doing, and it was right before, I think a week before COVID hit, and we went there with three of our close friends as witnesses, and there were two provisions that under the Foreign Marriage Act that can be done. One is if you were married in the US or any country, your marriage would be recognized, and the government of India can give you like a certification, yes, it's a valid wedding. And then the second thing is, if you haven't done that, you can actually go to a consulate with your partner and get your marriage solemnized. So the consular officer will do it for you and perform your wedding with witnesses. We took all the paperwork. We literally went with both things. And oh my God, what ensued was just
I have to say,
it was chaotic.
I feel bad for the poor lady at the counter who drew our number, because she's just some government bureaucrat. It's an ordinary day for her. And up comes this gay couple. We're like, hey, we'd like to register our marriage. And she's looking for the bride. She's
so for 20 minutes, she literally was not able to figure out.
She couldn't understand what we were saying. She's like, where's the girl? Like, there's no girl. There's two of us. We're married to each other. So then she's like, when she finally realizes what's happening, you can kind of see her eyes get bigger. And she's like, I'm going to need to go in the back and talk to somebody more senior. She scuttles off into the back room. And then like 10 minutes later, she comes back and she's like, yeah, senior officer is going to need to come and speak with you about this. So we said, yeah, we expected that. So then finally they call us in the back, and the senior consular officer comes up to us and he says, we're very sorry. We're not going to be able to register your marriage today. I said, okay, can you solemnize? Can you perform our wedding? We have witnesses. We have all the paperwork. He said, no, we will also not be able to solemnize your wedding. I said, okay, so you're denying us these two things. He said, yes. I said, can you please put that denial in writing, so we have proof that you're denying us? He said, nope, I will not put it in writing either. I said, are you doing this because we are a gay couple? And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, yes. And that was like, just like that Matthew Shepard moment where I stopped being afraid and started being angry. I got mad. I said, wait a minute. You are a senior government official from the largest democracy in the world. We are standing in Midtown Manhattan, in one of the most progressive nations in the world, and you are openly admitting to the fact that you are discriminating against us because of who we are, which is a violation of India's constitution, of the US Constitution, and of basic human decency. And so we walked out and we made the decision right then and there. We're going to sue.
And in retrospect, I also realized that it's not that these people had something against it. They were homophobic. There's nothing in the law that actually tells them, and they were just going by the book. The book had to be changed, not the people. And they were perfectly nice to us. So
I actually found the consular, when the consular officer said yes, we were discriminating against you, and you emailed him the next day to get him to clarify, and he doubled down on it. Look, we can make excuses for bigots all we want, but I'm kind of tired of making excuses for them. Bigotry is not acceptable, and in this day and age, especially a government official like that should have had more self-awareness, because this is all for the history books now. So what you say and what you do is going to be judged by the generations to come. And as this whole process proceeded, we first filed the case, as you mentioned, in front of the Delhi High Court. I don't know if you know this, Farhan, but our case has now been taken to the Indian Supreme Court, along with 50 other petitioners. We are now all collectively in front of the Indian Supreme Court. The hearings were held in April, and we're awaiting the decision. We expect to have a decision from the court probably in the next month or so.
But that time itself, Fran, you have to remember, like, I'm still a citizen of India, and the situation in India. There's so much of, like minorities are actually struggling right now in India because of the current government and its stance towards minorities. So I was scared. When the idea was pitched to me, I was like, you should do it, you should do it. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't understand. It's a different story altogether.
But what did I say? I said the reason why you should do it is because of the privilege and the status you enjoy, in that there are 70 million estimated LGBT people in India. Most of them are not able to, because of security reasons, because of their economic situations, because of where they live. They don't have the resources and the ability to do what you just did.
And I
so
thought
those of us who have privilege have to use that privilege on behalf of others, because once upon a time, Edie Windsor and Jim Obergefell, two ordinary people in America, decided to put everything of theirs on the line so that we could get married. And now we owe it to the next group to do it for them.
Yeah. So I remember when the lawyers, sent the final paperwork, it said Vaibhav JNV Union of India. It took me 24 hours to absorb that. That was really scary. And eventually Parag talked about, yes, it's we have to recognize our privilege and do it for people. And I also thought about all the men and women in India who were just like me. I was them 12 years ago. I had absolutely no hope in life. I didn't know what to do. And Farhan, you talk about the video. Even before the video, our wedding was being talked about. Hundreds and upon thousands of people have sent us Facebook messages. But I will tell you this: right after our wedding, on a mini moon, that we went to Arizona, and we're like chilling over there, and I'm getting hundreds of messages, and I'm responding to every single one of them. And Parag's like, "What's wrong with you, dude? We're on a honeymoon. Like, just relax. You don't need to check your phone." I'm like, "No, Parag. These people, you should read these." And I made you read so many of those messages. It just talks about, they were so excited. They're like, "I see hope here. Now you tell me, how can you help me?" Wow. So I knew, like, I'm not doing it for myself. I think I'm just doing it for my family, my community, who's back there, waiting for some help. And we're just giving that, last push.
Yeah. And I can kind of relate to some of that, because I was living in India in 2017 and in Mumbai. And at that time, I was personal training actress Deepika Padukone.
Oh.
Yeah, and I was working with her for about a year and a half prior to that in Toronto, and then I relocated to help her get ready for the movie Padmavati. And so during that time, I relocated to Mumbai, and I was there for about 8 months. And at that time, it was, homosexuality was still considered criminal. And I was treading very lightly, trying to navigate this country where I'd come from a place of complete freedoms, where I didn't have to second guess who I was. I could talk to whoever I want, have open relationships as far as who I was dating, all of that. And then to feel the constraints and the restrictions in a foreign country, it was very difficult. And I could feel the underlying sort of, okay, don't say much about who you are, don't talk a lot about who you are, but there's this understanding of who's gay, who's not. I went to a couple of LGBTQ nights that are hosted at various nightclubs, and they're all sort of underground, and you had to sort of know somebody in order to go. And it was like going back into somewhat of a secret life. So it amazes me that after having experienced that just 6 years ago, that I'm having this conversation with you guys. And I think it's just incredible to see how much progress in just being able to have these conversations, to be able to say that there's hearings taking place, that there's a movement happening right now. And to be able to have this conversation with two of the people that are leading this fight, like, I'm in complete awe of you guys. And I think to a picture that I saw of you, Vaibhav, and you're holding Pariniti in your hands and feeding her, her bottle, and you're watching the hearings online. And I'm thinking in my mind, and I'm going a few years ahead. And I had this vision of what Pariniti might be thinking, later in life, when she goes back and looks at that picture, when she sees her father holding her as a child, knowing that her birth and her brother's has been part of, intention to make this happen in our world, and that her fathers were leading this change. It must feel like to her one day, and to Vivan, that their dads are superheroes.
No, that's very nice of you to say.
You're too kind.
I don't know that we had thought of it that way, what we thought of is the responsibility we have because somebody did this for us and we've got to do it for somebody else.
And we wanted to show the courts that, we are actually a family. There is not just one life attached to, these decisions. There are multiple lives and multiple newborn lives and older people. It's all connected. So, our lawyers had actually asked us to come on video if possible, because everything was through WebEx. And that at one point of time, apparently our picture was on the screen, because I think I may have unmuted accidentally or something, and we were on the screen for a few seconds, and all the justices apparently looked at us. And, because at the end of the day, they're also human beings, just like us, and they feel. And it's not that, yes, they have to make decisions here, but it's our lives that they're talking about here.
And we wanted to counter the arguments that were being made by the government of India, because the government of India made a lot of arguments that really were nonsensical. One of them was that this doesn't really affect a lot of people, so it's not a priority. And what we were trying to say is actually, it doesn't just affect the 70 million LGBTQ people in India. It also affects the people who love them, their parents, their children, their family, their friends.
Urgent.
The second argument they made is that marriage should be reserved for those people who can procreate and produce children, and that's heterosexual families. That is a argument that has been disproven time and time again. I don't understand why that argument keeps resurfacing. So I think by coming on screen with our daughter in our hand to say, actually, we are families, and our families may not come to being the way your families do, but they're just as valid, they're just as important.
And there's as much love as your family.
And there's as much love. And gay parents and lesbian parents can raise happy, healthy, wonderful human beings. And in fact, that's what we're trying to do. But we need this legitimacy. And I think the last argument that really blows my mind is this argument that, well, this is not for the judges to decide. This is something that Parliament and the representatives of the people should decide. Once again, I would say the Foreign Marriage Act was written over almost 50 years ago, right? And it is very clear that a marriage is a marriage is a marriage. And all you're doing is you're discriminating against us because I'm a man and I'm not a woman. If I were a woman, there would be no question. But because I'm a man, there is. That is sex discrimination. That is already illegal in the Indian Constitution. So whose job is it to interpret the laws? It's the job of the judges. And that's what they're going to do. And I think come July, we are probably going to get a very favorable verdict, is what I hope for. And even if we don't, on the off chance that we don't win this time, this fight is not over, because the nature of human progress is this. Just like with decriminalizing homosexuality in India, first we lost and then we won. We will keep fighting until we win. And someday, Buddy Neethi and her brother will look back and they won't think about dad holding me during the hearings. They'll think about, why did it take this long for people to understand the most fundamental truth of all, which is that love is love.
That's true. And it is my hope that during that time, when the conversation around fight for equality is something more that they will see as part of being in history, as opposed to the world that they exist in now.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, gents, wrapping up, I just want to say a big thank you. I want to thank you for the time that you took to speak with me today. I know you have a lot on your plate. You have 2 newborns, as well as everything that we talked about. I want to say just how much I admire you both. Your love has turned into an incredible force in our world, which is impacting so many members of the LGBTQ plus community, including and not limited to their families. I applaud you all for your efforts in your advocacy to legalize same-sex marriage and in human rights. And I'll repeat what I say. I think Paranithi and Vivan will one day look at you two as superheroes.
Thank you so much, Farhan.
Thank you, Farhan. And
appreciate you having us on the show.
Thank you for actually, bringing visibility to our story, because I think you're also doing a very important job of bringing our stories to the people, so that people can understand that our stories also matter. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
And may your families always be blessed. Always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farhan.
All the best. Thank you so much.
Bye.
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 I'm Farhan Dalla. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode of Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast. I hope today's conversation has elevated you in some way and inspired you to connect, move, and meditate. I'd really appreciate your support by following and rating this podcast. Come back soon and join me for another transformative conversation.